Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddy Network podcast. My guest today is Reverend Eric Reniva. He is a Methodist pastor in a rural community in Illinois, and he comes to us through a mutual friendship that we have with another one of my guests, Mari Amam. And so I'm happy that you're here, Eric. I look forward to our conversation. I think we have a number of touch points that will lead us to a very interesting conversation that people will feel very appreciative of and find value in. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So where
What?
would you like to start?
Well, tell us about where you live. What you live in a rural town in Illinois. So tell us a little. Give us an idea of what's that's like, and what's it like to be a pastor of a church in that kind of setting.
Yeah, so as a Methodist pastor, Methodist pastors are moved around. We're called kind of circuit riders, John Wesley. And uh, I've been moved about from Chicago proper to small town Waterman. Uh, it's a farming community, and it's a wonderful little place. So the church it's like one of those old time movie shows, like where the church is right in the middle of town, and when you walk out the door, they're like, "Hey, pastor, what's going on? What's up?" And so it's a very unique setting because you don't get that all the time in Chicago. When you're in the city, usually sometimes the parsonage where the pastor stays is kind of removed from the building sometimes, maybe 15, 20 minutes away. But we're literally next door to the church. And so people know, like, oh, that house right there, that's the pastor's house. Um, but it's cool because my family and we're part of the community. So I get to talk to my neighbors all the time. Kids that go to our church, families that go to our church that live in the neighborhood. So it's really neat to when you ride your bike, you can stop and have conversations with people and say they can tell you like, hey, I thought your sermon was great, or had this question about this, when is our next, coffee time? It's a really cool, blessed thing, I think, to be just that have that intimate relationship with people. And you know, Chicago, we had the same thing, but it was a little more difficult to do. And in my thought, um, church is kind of still part of life, if that makes sense. So, in the city, people are very, very busy, and it's just even out here too. Um, but I think uh, church is still very much part of Sunday morning. Where are we going? We're going to church, you know, and uh, and that's really neat. And so it's been a blessing to be here. Life is a little slower, which is not a bad thing. Uh, and you know, recently we have a thing called Summerfest out here, and it's a tractor show. And
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah, my friends in the city are like, a tractor show. I'm like, you got to go. Yeah, it sounds weird, but it's a lot of fun, and that's where people go, and that's where people connect. And so our church serves ice cream during that time in a tent, and I was like, wow, if this is, I always hope this will be part of my work to make ice cream floats, shake hands, greet people, and bless them, that way. So it's been really cool to be in
So
small
it's a
town.
it's a major part of ministry is to have connections with people, and
Yeah.
because you represent you re, you represent the institution of the Methodist Church or institution of religion, and sometimes people find that to be cold and distant, just like some kind of corporation.
Hmm.
But you have the opportunity to make it warm and cuddly, so to speak. because you got to put your arm around them, and you give them a hug, and you give them a little punch in the arm. It's normal. It's kind of normal life, and
Yeah.
so how large a church is yours?
Say again, I'm sorry.
How many members does your congregation have?
I think we have about in our roster.
Yeah,
We have about 100 or so, but being that we're in a farming community, uh, give or take what's going on in the fields, the numbers fluctuate with any given Sunday because, if one family is planting their corn and it's getting ready time for harvest, they're not going to be there, and they'll tell me like, Pastor, we're not going to be there for a month because we got to get our stuff out. And it's like,
yeah.
oh, I understand, and so we say a prayer for them to keep them, for God's presence and safety in the fields. And because sadly, accidents can happen while you're doing work out there. But, um, so give or take, but on a given Sunday, we usually have like 30 members in church, and we have a bunch of rowdy kids too, which is a huge blessing. I'm not one of those like stuffy pastors that tells kids to be like, shh, shh. I hear them laughing and playing in the back, and
Hey, they're there. That's great.
yeah.
I pastored a church for a couple of years in Southwest Oklahoma, and that's dry land cotton growing country. And I didn't have many farmers in the church. We had more of the community people, insurance agents and school teachers, that sort of place. But one Sunday in the winter, it was cold and it was snowy and icy, and not very many people showed up. And we did the service as normal. And one of the old timers came up to me after. He says, "Pastor, if only one cow comes, I don't feed him the whole load." And he was basically saying, I talked too long, and we didn't need the entire service because there was only about three people there. And I said, "Well, I'm a young guy. I don't know any better." But I, I've never forgotten that. But I really enjoyed being in those communities because they have a human connection that sometimes is more difficult in cities, as you described. And yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So,
But I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, how long have you been at this congregation?
I'll be going on my second year, and hoping to stay longer. My usually our stays at different communities have been about 3 years or so, and then we be up and go. And so it's eh,
Can the church
but
request that they keep you longer?
I know I guess it's we go off of gifts and graces, So if the church is growing with, like my skill sets, where I'm a career, like they thought I don't like bragging, and so I'm humbly saying that they dig my creativity, my sermon style, where I'm just kind of conversational, so I don't, I just want to talk. And I was a youth pastor for a very long time, so I'm a big youth geek, and I have my own kids too. So, if I could pan around my office, I have a shelf over there filled with pictures of my family, it's stuff for church, and a shelf with Batman and Green Lantern on it, and I have the Blues Brothers on my wall next to my
Oh,
a picture that says everything is possible to him who believes, So it's
we're
just,
on a mission for a God.
yeah, exactly.
I love that movie. That's great. That's Chicago too. That's
Yeah,
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 Chicago. So we're
yeah,
connected
man.
through Mari.
Yeah, so where this church has really, I'm sorry. Oh, it's done.
We're connected through Mari, and
Yes.
you two knew each other in art school. So I want to understand what led you to go to art school, and what is it that you studied there, and tell us about how art and therefore has a place in your ministry there in.
Uh, Okay. Well, so I had I have always been a geek at heart. I grew up watching, the 80s cartoons, Thundercats and Ghostbusters and all those really sweet cartoons that uh, I wish they would just have more of it. But it has always been one of my loves in my life. And so I went to art school wanting to become a comic book writer, the next Quentin Tarantino, and yeah, I used to draw a lot. In art school, I found that I was a better like creative writer than a drawer. There's a lot more talented guys. Um, and Mari, if I remember, was in kind of the graphic design end of it, some more typography and things like that. And so we both worked at the school. So she was in the print department, and I was working in the library, and we just had a connection of friends. So we hung out a bunch and uh, worked collegially with people at school. And so where I feel like art connects, I had a really wonderful professor, Dr. Karla Kincannon, um, and she had put it on out there that, and I'm so glad that she did because it was the way I was seeing it in my head. I just didn't know how to. I didn't know if anyone else was thinking the same thing. But God is a creator. God is an artist. Karla said in her class that when we do art, uh, we are tapping into that image of God that we have, that God is a creator. And so when we make beautiful things, when we build stuff, create things, that is the God's given gift to us to make beautiful and wonderful things. And so she's like, do art, do whatever. Take photo, take photos, go outside and paint, just tap into that. And when you do that, we are tapping into that that aspect of God. And when you do art, it just helps you to see the beauty in everything. I think that's one of the coolest things that came out of art school was that it see the beauty in lots of different things that I would not have thought of. Um, so particularly like life drawing, right? Our teacher didn't always have these, burly, ripped people or very, slender people, but it was people of all shapes and sizes. And to be able to draw them, for one, their vulnerability for you to draw them. But it's just like when I was drawing them, I was like, God made this person, God made that person, and we all share that beauty, that dignity from God. Um, and so I'm grateful for that eye-opening thing from art school, but then also to have one of my professors in seminary uh, just affirm that God is a creator, and uh, if you look outside your window, you'll see the beauty of God's creation just before you. And I also, with art and ministry too, it's just particularly in the city too. When you look out your window and instead of feeling that piece of like that's beautiful out there, but if you look out your window and like, wow, that's not beautiful. Like, why is it like that? Why is it broken? Then it shows you that I need to put a little love in that place, and that becomes your mission field. I know when we were in Rockford, for example, my mission field became very apparent when our church was next door to a school building, and we had a ministry with the kids. Well, there was a nice playground in that school building. People burned it down, and I was baffled. I was like, "Why would you burn down this playground? That's crazy." And so it became apparent to me, like, there's a mission field because that shouldn't be happening. Where peace and joy should be taking place, there's terror and brokenness instead. And so, how do we fix that? And how do we uh, empower each other to get things moving? And so, I hope that answers to what you were asking.
I think it's a fantastic answer. I think what you're describing is Well, let me come at it this way: that so much of what we do deal with in life is mental. We think about things and we articulate them, and and particularly in a very diverse society, we're sort of obligated to have a statement, an ideological statement, which is ours that defines who we are. And I think what you're describing is the flip side of that, where we don't need that ideological statement, but rather we have an appreciation for what is, for the beauty of the world, or the ugliness of the broken parts of the beauty of the world. And we can just say, well, this is this, I see this, I've experienced this, and that way we're not setting it up as something that's contentious or something that we must ultimately end up in an argument over. We can just say,
Mhm.
well, let's look at this. And you have some art that you were telling me you would like to show. You want to show that and let us use those as kind of
Um,
a way talk about this.
well, so what was so as a art geek and pastor, I always try to bring forth examples, so like this past Sunday I was preaching about the clay tablet, in your heart. And so I made some clay clay tablets. And
Uh-huh.
I wrote on it. Oh, it's backwards, but I wrote on it, just to show how
It's correct.
soft the tablet is.
It reads correctly this way. It does read.
Okay. Okay. So, I wrote on it with a stick just to show how soft the clay is, and how easy it
Ah.
is for our hearts and minds to be influenced. And so art is really applicable.
Oh,
And
that's brilliant.
yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. And um, one of the cool things that has come out of me becoming a pastor and having friends who are still in the art field um, was I have friends who are exhibitors, in comic book conventions and things. And so they always give me comic books that have Christian connotations, I guess. So there's a lot of comic books out there that I find really cool because it just shows you that the writers are wrestling with their faith, that they're
Mhm.
thinking about it. There's a sweet comic book called Punk Rock Jesus. Another one from Image Comics called Haunt, where the ghost of the priestly brother haunts the 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 brother who is a secret agent. So just really neat things. And when I found out that there was a graphic novel version of Jesus' life, I bought it. So
Huh.
it just if you like anime,
I
it
do.
tells Jesus' life.
I do.
The Life of Jesus, a graphic novel, and
So
just really something the epic Bible. It's all illustrated, you know. Uh, so art has a
can you
place in
can you give
things.
us a bit of an interpretation of that graphic novel on the life of Jesus? Can you give us kind of a sense of what the author is trying to convey through his or her images?
So I would compare it to like the that current TV show called The Chosen that's
Uh-huh.
been going around where they're just kind of putting flesh to the stories.
Right.
Um, so for this, the artist, draws puts faces on all of the 12 apostles when Jesus calls them. We don't ever get descriptions of, so Peter was, 6 foot tall and, chiseled because he was a fisherman, or, Matthew looked like this. So it's uh, the artist of this comic book just does what Chosen does, puts some flesh to it. So that way it just baptizes your imagination, So, oh, that's how it could have looked
And,
like, or that's how this could have happened.
and he's just telling the stories from the Gospels. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So it's just a fun way to approach it because I think sometimes people get freaked out about the Bible. It's intimidating because it's big and but it's like it doesn't have to be. And and I'm as a pastor, I hope that that's what I put out there with my sermons and when we do Bible studies and things, just that uh, the Bible doesn't have to be intimidating. God is not intimidating, but God just wants a relationship with you. And so, however you want to enter that through comic books, The Chosen, whatever, just use it to help. Um,
30 years ago, I was working at a college, and I was the chaplain at the college and also running a leadership program, small church related college. And one of the religion professors had a heart attack 2 weeks before the beginning of the fall term.
yeah.
And one of the classes he was going to teach that term was the New Testament. And so I got drafted to teach that course. And so I didn't have time to prepare. I had all my other work I had to do. I was doing this as an extra thing. And and so I just pulled out my notes from seminary and I was going to teach those. And I was immediately, I mean, within the first 20 minutes, I realized that the context of seminary is not the context of these young people's lives. And most of
Yeah.
them were not church kids. Most of them didn't know who these people were. They knew the name Jesus, but they didn't know anything about Jesus. I mean, it was like going to an alien planet and
Mhm.
talking to people about the United States or Great Britain or something. There is no foundational knowledge which would help them to understand these stories. And
Mhm.
it was a real challenge. And so all I ended up doing was just teaching stories, telling stories, and taking those stories and saying, this is what this means, that sort of thing, which sounds like is kind of what you're doing with your people in your congregation. And so are you using art in your worship services in this way? Is there a way to do that like that?
I try to, so I try to find images of different things when it suits the moment. I did the clay thing the other week. Especially with my kids. Like we always have a kids moment. So I was talking about the armor of God last Sunday. So one of my former church members gave me this really cool, I left it up in my pulpit thing, but just a cool like armature of armor. But me being me, I printed out a picture of Mandalorian armor from Star Wars, and I said, I'm being honest, this is how my armor of God looks like, and just show them, Mandalorian armor because I love that stuff. So um,
That's great.
I try to use it as much as I can, to just help people connect in different ways. And I think imagery is powerful stuff that, when you see it, it sticks with you. Um,
Yeah.
and so like example, we're watching The Chosen at our church with alongside with some Bible explanation. And one of my parishioners told me, he's like, when I think about Nicodemus now, I see Nicodemus from The Chosen. And so like, that imagery really sticks with you, and it just, like I said, it helps you put the flesh to the stories, it makes that much more real. Uh, yeah, so I mean, art is fantastic. I love it. Um,
So let's bump this out a little bit to a larger. Where do you see art as a means of connecting people together as a community?
mm. So I have always seen that, like, so uh when we lived in Oak Park for a bit, that's closer to Chicago. The one of the I took pictures of it a bunch of times. So there's this train pass where the metro station is and the L train station is, and it's just a brick bridge and stuff. People started taking ownership of little squares and started putting up murals there. So just to add beauty to, just this kind of run down, side of brick. But once they got started, there was just these beautiful pictures all the way across. down this block of road, and um, it just makes you smile because some of the images were cute. Some of them were like, what is this a picture of? Like what is this mural of? And what was the artist trying to do here? Um, but it just I think it brightens up communities. I think it pulls people together. Um, in the Calb, the town, Belvedere, town few like an hour away from us here. They're called the Town of Murals, and they have these huge murals on buildings all over Belvedere, downtown Belvedere, and it just adds beauty to it. Um, and it's they call themselves the Town of Murals, and so I think that enhances who they are. Like this is a beautiful community. We take care of each other, and here it is. I mean, no community is immune to brokenness and things like that by no means. But I think when you see people taking care of the spaces, taking care of each other, then it just empowers people to do the same thing. Like if this group is taking care of them, then we should be doing the same. Um, I
Where
remember like, oh, I'm sorry.
where in Illinois are these two towns? Your town and Belvedere. Where are they located? Say between Chicago and St. Louis. Where are they between
Uh,
Chicago and St. Louis?
oh, west of Chicago, headed kind of like toward Wisconsin, so like northwest going upwards.
Okay,
Uh, and
that's where you
yeah,
are. That's where you are.
yeah.
Okay.
So uh, so my town of Waterman is actually an hour south of Belvedere and an hour away east of Chicago,
How close to
or west of
Iowa?
Chicago, sorry,
How close to Iowa are you?
5 hours away.
Oh,
I think.
oh, a long
Yeah,
way.
it's a ways. Yeah, it's a ways.
I'm just trying
Yeah,
to geography. I like geography. I like maps. I'm just trying to place where you are. So
yeah. Wow.
I drive across country quite a bit, and I always have to go through Illinois. It's the tip of
Oh, okay.
southern tip of it down there. Um, you know,
Well, if you ever drive down, if you go on Interstate 88 going west and get off of Route 30, Route 30 takes you through all the little towns. So there's like Sugar Grove, then Big Rock, Hinkley, then it's Waterman, then onward to Dixon, Illinois. So they're just a string of, that's where we're at.
okay,
String of small towns.
okay. So let's talk a little bit about the difference. Um, let's talk a little bit about what life is like in a rural community today. I mean, I know it's farming, and I know, you know, during planting season and during harvest season, the farmers are going to disappear from church,
Yeah.
but there are other things that go on. So, what is it that what are the things that happen in a small town or small rural town that brings people together as the community where they say, well, we're the citizens of Waterman. What is it that kind of provides the opportunity for that to happen?
I like the things that our churches do, so we are uh I call it my road here that we live on. I call it the road of two churches because we literally have a Presbyterian church next door to us, right across the street, and uh, and we have a great working relationship with them. We do stuff together like VBS and things like that, and so I can tell you, for Vacation Bible School this year, we had almost I think we had like 50 to 55 kids. Not all of them go to our church, but they're just kids in the neighborhood. And so for 3 days, we had half the kids of Waterman in our church. It was fantastic. It was really cool. And so
So
churches are good.
were the two churches working together on that on the
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Does that
And
happen a
so
lot? Does that happen a lot?
we try to make it happen a lot. where we do joint services and things like that. And VBS is always a yes. We always do that together. Um, but I try to talk with the pastor across the street, and we know the folks who go there because they live next door to us, so we always see them. Um, we have big annual events, like I said, the tractor show, for example. That is a big event that the community gets together for every single year. Um,
Do they do a
we have
tractor pull? Do they do a tractor pull?
they they do, and this year my youngest son was able to ride in one of the tractors in the in the baseball field. So I have a video of him just like he's like, yeah, Dad, I did it, just roving around. I was like, that's so cool, man. And so stuff like that. And we're very blessed that um, one of our church members, they own they have a lot of horses, and they have a small petting zoo. So every year after VBS, we throw an ice cream social. So just anybody that wants to come have ice cream and hang out with us. And that family brings their horses and their petting zoo. And um uh Phil, he's the owner of all the horses. He gets his horse and wagon, and he'll take people on wagon rides around the park. And people love that. They know Phil and his family for those horses and their generosity, and that's huge. That's a blessing, And like we have other little events like that throughout the year, but things like that. And like I said, the church being the center of town, really, um, people just know where to go, where to find you. So if they need to talk with the pastor, they need help, we're right here. You know, and that's a really cool thing that we have. Um, we're a very missional church. We do a lot of different outreach. Like we have a ecumenical group that we joined up with called the Nice Center. Um, it's a food pantry. You can get clothes and food on Saturday mornings if you need it. Uh, we do Hope Haven, where we serve meals to people in their homes. Um, so even in rural areas, there is a need, and I'm so blessed and grateful that our church helps to fill those needs. Uh, and so I think the strength of being in a small town is just the connectivity, because you know people kind of know everybody, and so they'll tell me like, Pastor, did you know so and so went to the hospital? It's like, oh no, I didn't. Like you should probably go check them out. I'm like, for sure, I will check them out. And they're only a walk away, literally. And I'm able to do that. And so, yeah, small towns have that unique connectivity that I think you get kind of lost sometimes in the big city, where it's harder to find people and get to people. Um, but that's the unique challenge of being in suburban and urban ministries. Staying connected, finding time to give uh, people time to be together. I know in Chicago, uh, I was trying to be creative where I would host table tennis and Bible study. So, you know, table tennis players would come in, we would play, and then we have a small Bible study, then keep playing some more. Just little things to bring us together, to stay connected. Um,
Are you
and
are you
I'm sorry.
familiar with the concept of a third place? You know that concept? Have you ever heard of that?
No, sir.
Um, this was something that was very um, talked about a lot, probably 30 years ago, 25 years ago. Uh, a first place is home. Second
Mhm.
place is work. A third place are those social gathering places in a community where people come together, church being one of those. Um, Coffee shops are another, or diners in local
Mhm.
communities, bowling alleys, bars. These are all places that people gather socially to, talk and share and have a good time, and where they they make their connections. And um, I've done a lot of work in rural areas, and I find that there's some kind of tipping point where, um, economically, all of a sudden, those kinds of places begin to diminish and they go away. You know,
Mm.
um, you know, hyperinflation, contributes to that. Things like that. Um, but what kind of places in Waterman do people go to just kind of gather and be together, other than the church? Do you have places like that?
The library. We have the library.
Yeah.
Uh, we have a very wonderful park, actually, the Lions Club Park.
Hmm.
They have a free splash pad, which is fantastic that they
Oh
offered
yeah.
that. They built it. So I think that's a great like third place to be. We always have kids over there. Um, like I said, our church and but otherwise, yeah, I feel like I'm like not exhausting the list, but those are the big places that I always bring my kids to. And when we go there, there's always other kids and families. So
Do people pop into the church all the time to see you? They're driving by
yeah,
and stop and they come in and say, "How you doing, Pastor?" Or
usually I'll see folks outside when I'm walking or they'll stop in like that. Every once in a while, I'll have folks come in for stuff they want to talk about, and I don't ever turn anyone away. And so I have that open door policy. If you want to come talk, I am here. And uh, confidentiality. But no, people use that, and I'm grateful for that. Um,
so let me ask you this. Um, what is the best thing about being a pastor in a rural community?
I would say that it's just I I would say it's more, I don't know, more family oriented, I guess. That's the only way I can describe it. That I can't tell you how grateful I am that I'm able to walk outside, say hello to my neighbor, and not be snobbed off. And that
Yeah.
they'll stand there and talk with me.
Hmm.
Um, I think in a rural area, it's a little safer. In Chicago, Rockford, there are some really rough patches. So I can't tell you how much of a blessing it is that I can let my kids go outside and they're gonna ride their bike and I don't have to worry about it so much that someone's not gonna hit them with a car or someone's gonna shoot at them. You know, uh, there's a dangers everywhere, but this town is pretty safe. You know, thanks be to God. And I think that shows just about how much the community cares for each other, that they keep it safe, they keep it clean. They want it to be a safe place for their kids and other families, and that's huge. Um, and so for me, it's just that amount of peace that I have not fully had when I was in the city, especially raising my family. Just that peaceful place for them to grow up, meet other kids, and you know and I know most of the kids because they go to our church, so I know their families. So like when I was growing up, my mom would always want to know who my friends' parents were. And so they had that peace of mind. And so parents are always talking with each other. So I guess call me old fashioned. I like having the same thing, knowing who my kids are hanging out with. So in a small town, you're able to do that. That's the biggest thing for me. Um, and for me too, it's just in a small town, like I said, I think church is still part of their life. So it's not just necessarily a box that's checked on a list, like, okay, I've gone to church, I'm done, and then off to soccer or whatever. But people genuinely care to be in church, that this is the place where they go to recharge spiritually, where they can find rest, I think, from a busy week. Um, but also then just to connect with friends too, So um,
I
yeah, I'm sorry.
I get the feeling that you would be a fantastic person to have as a pastor of the church I would attend because you seem to be very aware and very sensitive to the situations that people experience. And that's really important. And so I commend you for that because I think that's very, very important.
Thank you. Um, yeah, and I think that's something. It's I always just think of like I don't want people to go through hardships by themselves. I think that's something that Jesus didn't want us to do too.
Yeah.
Jesus comes alongside people, and I just want to mimic that too. And yeah, there were times when I was growing up where I hit some dark times, and I felt like I was by myself, and that's part of my own theology as a pastor, that I don't ever want people to feel like they're by themselves, because they're not. We're here. The community is here for them, and I would, and I don't judge. So one a pastor many years ago told me that the conversation you have with God doesn't have to be perfect. So if all you have to offer God in a particular moment is your swear words and your anger, God is not afraid of that. God will listen to you. But it's just being in conversation with God that matters. That's part of my theology that, when people come to have coffee, I'm not there to judge, whatever's on your mind, whatever's in your heart, let's talk about it. And then we'll work through it. Because there's a few times in my life where it's just been hard, and uh, I felt like I was by myself. And I don't ever want anyone to do that.
I
And
agree with
so
you, and I
I just
think
try to extend grace.
I agree with you, and I think a lot of times the ministry that we offer to people is really not so much the professional program that we have been trained to offer, but rather the our own experience of grace that has been given to us that we are now sharing with other people.
Mhm. Yeah.
Last question for you.
Yes, sir.
Um, as you look forward into the future and you're thinking about your children and they're growing up and becoming adults and finding their way in what is your hope for the future?
My hope for the future is that it will be something bright. Like one of the things I always pray for on a daily basis is just that uh, I pray that people will see each other as God sees them, as worth it, worth of love, worth that they have dignity, that it's been given to them. And so I always pray for my kids and the kids of my church, just kids in general, that they'll grow up uh, with grace and wisdom and be able to see the way God sees them as worth it and worth loving. Because I think when you lose that ability to see people with God-given dignity and and grace, then that's bad stuff happens. You know, uh, you get violent moments where people are like, "Well, I can shoot you because you're not worth it," or "I don't have to care about you because I don't believe you're worth it, and what I want is what I want, and you're not it." And so I just always pray that um, as adults too, that we can be that example for our kids to remind them that God sees you with dignity and grace, that you're fearfully and wonderfully made, that going back to the art analogy, you're God's masterpiece. And so God has his signature on you. So if you're God's masterpiece, then your friend is God's masterpiece.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't go and deface art. People would get mad if you went to the art museum and defaced the Mona Lisa. It would be a travesty. And so can't we do the same with each other? You wouldn't deface or break someone else and call it, and not call it a travesty. But to truly, love neighbor and treat each other with respect. And so that's what I'm hoping for the future. and
I like that.
that's always been my.
I like that very much. And I wish you well in your ministry there, and wherever your ministry takes you, may you find that you're able to be focused and remain that person that we see here right now in all the different contexts of ministry that you're taking into. Because uh, obviously you um, have internalized the gift of God's love, and that is something you're sharing with the people that you encounter there and every day.
Glory to God. That's all I can say. Just uh, I'm grateful that God has not given up on me, and I don't want to give up on anybody else.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being with us today, and thank you all for watching. And I hope this will bring you some inspiration and maybe a recognition that there's some people that you should be connecting with and showing your concern and your love for. And that's always possible. You know,
Yes.
and all you have to do is just take that first step and begin to express that. So thank you, Eric, and thank you everyone again, and we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.